Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Professionally Curious. Here you're joined by myself, Joanna. I'm the co-founder of Soon, and Michael from Zero Gravity. And we actually met at the last Hack office event. Yeah, they had a AG's general, what do you call it? Oh, AGC, is that right? AGM, GAGM, yeah. Yeah, annual general meeting. And and then we saw each other as porcos of Hack. But yeah, the whole point of this podcast is to, give founders perspective, to tell their side of the story. I challenged myself to interview the 100 most insightful founders in crypto, and today certainly I am very honored to be joined by Michael here.
Thanks for meeting me in New York. I'm here for a couple of days. I'm jet lagged as hell coming from Bali, but it's fun to be here.
Yeah, I will preface by saying that we're in a restaurant, so maybe there's a little bit more background noise than usual, but really wanted to get into this, right, Michael? I think you have a very interesting background story coming into crypto and also starting the company, Zero Gravity, along with your co-founders, Thomas, Ming, and Fan. Yeah, so can you just give us like a overview of your journey so far?
Yeah, what's been interesting is that I've been wanting to be an operator in the Web3 space probably since 2016 when I saw the whole ICO explosion happen. And what I really enjoyed about it was that people weren't shy about trying ideas, even that I knew weren't going to work, but it was just so fun that anyone could back something. And it was just such democratic force for people to participate and be part of innovation. And to me, that was just very fun. And I think that's when I knew I wanted to build something in the space. Before that, I've known about Bitcoin probably since 2011 and didn't pay too much attention to it. I saw a show on it and I read the white paper and I was like, oh, this seems cool. And then it wasn't really until 2013, 2014, early 14 when I bought some of my first Bitcoin on Coinbase. And I was like, oh, this is super cool. I want to be part of this, more from a retail investor side. But then ICO era happened. I started doing some kind of mining for fun, some Bitcoin mining. I did some Ethereum mining as well. Actually, at the time I was going through Y Combinator and we had a ton of free compute credits. And so I was like, what would happen if I just kind of use some of my Azure credits and do some Ethereum mining? And so I built some scripts to basically get all of that up and running. And I was like, oh, this is super cool. I'm actually utilizing almost 99 to 100% of the GPU and CPU resources of these particular instances that I was spinning up, to the point where Azure's team actually called me up and was like, hey, you're utilizing some really interesting compute. What are you actually doing? And so I talked to them a bit about this mining thing. They were like, oh, this is so cool. So anyways, it was just really fun. And I actually, as a result, got my brother really excited about IT because he was in uni at the time. He was an undergrad at University of Manchester and he wasn't quite sure what he wanted to do. He was studying kind of EECS and he really enjoyed kind of building these different rigs and putting together different hardware specs and working on mining and so on. That was super fun to get him inspired as well about kind of that journey. And then all the way to DeFi summer, and I was like, oh, this is super cool. Now we have a financial infrastructure, and this is truly changing the application layer as well. To then, I was kind of running a company called Garden at the time, and COVID started happening at that time, and it became a very difficult management situation for me, where effectively everything was going up and to the right. Y Combinator-backed unicorn company. COVID hits, we have to downsize from 650 people to literally 30 people by the end of the year. And so it's a really crazy management challenge that I had to overcome. Eventually sold the company, happy outcome, but I was kind of tired from that whole experience and I was looking for something different. And so late 2022, Thomas, who was my classmate at Stanford, where his classmates were talking about Bitcoin and we were talking about kind of crypto and did a bunch of deals together, called me up and he basically said, hey, 5 years ago I invested in this company called Conflux and Ming and Fan are some of the best engineers I've ever backed, been on their board, really like them. Are you interested in meeting with them? And I was like, yeah, kind of ready for something new. I'm kind of working things out on Garten at the moment, but I want to start something new. And so met with Ming and Fan 6 months of co-founder dating later. I was like, wow, these are like the best engineers I've ever worked with. And I've worked in many places like Microsoft and SAP Labs and Bain, Bridgewater, and like really talented people there, but they were just another level. And I also found that the value system that we share, the vision that we share was just really aligned. And yeah, we basically started just with the team and we didn't really have a proper idea at the time. So this was like May of 2023. And so that's how I kind of got together into the space from a bunch of different angles.
I mean, you guys certainly had a lot of experience from the Web 2 world, right? So I think that's what really, like, first thing that really struck me as very different from the founding background is, you all have, you're adults in the room, right? You all have walked very different lives, and as you mentioned, came together as a alliance here. And I wanted to maybe dive into the founding thesis, right? So in that paper, you mentioned you framed this AI blockchain as the next operating substrate, not just an app layer. So what kind of lessons you learned, or what kind of pivots validated that approach?
Yeah, it was quite interesting as a journey because we took it step by step. So initially what we saw is we needed a kind of data availability layer that was significantly faster of what was available. Because if you look at data center speeds, you're dealing with hundreds of gigabytes per second, terabytes per second in throughput for AI type of workloads. And what was common in Web3 at the time was megabyte, 10 megabytes, 20 megabytes per second. Even Solana Firedance, I think, was slated for like a gigabyte plus. And that's just not sufficient if you want to do really on-chain, let's say training, for example, in the future. And we basically built this high-performance, infinitely scalable data availability layer, knowing that that's going to be one component. And given kind of all the Conflux experience Ming and Fan had, they knew how to build really high-scale kind of layer ones. So when Ethereum was doing 13 transactions a second, 6-7 years ago, they basically architected a DAG mechanism that was doing 6,000 transactions a second on proof of work. And so massive kind of speed gains at the time. And so a very similar kind of mindset that we took to this. So started with the DA layer, which was actually built on top of Ming's research on decentralized storage. At Microsoft Research, he wrote a couple really key papers called Tango and Curfew that then led to the design of the decentralized storage system, which was then one of the key bases for the data availability layer. Because his key insight basically, or our key insight, was that we need to segment data into two lanes. One is a data publishing lane and one is a data storage lane. Because if you commingle them, then you're doing the same computation many, many times over. You're basically moving the blob data to all of the validators at the same time across the entire network, and you're creating this kind of broadband or data communication bottleneck. And by segmenting those two into different lanes, you're parallelizing the process. And so every node that gets added to the network now adds to the overall throughput speed of the network, which then leads to infinite scalability. But then we figured out that at some point a consensus mechanism becomes the bottleneck. So then how do you also parallelize the consensus mechanisms? And so you can use a sense of restaking and then just get consensus mechanisms spun up as the throughput needs increase. And so it took us like 8 iterations to basically come up with this entire infrastructure and architecture. It was pretty fun to come through it because I kept pushing like, why are we thinking about this in such a linear way? Like, why are we saying like, oh, this should be like 20 megabytes? This is not what's required of future AI workloads. We should be thinking of it like in a Web 2 sense. Like AWS, they don't tell you like, oh, you have X amount of limitation on your compute. You basically spin up a new EC2 instance, you have more compute requirements. And so we should be thinking about Web 3 in a very similar way. So I had those two components. Then we built layer 1. Then we built the compute network that allows you to do things like inference and fine-tuning and pre-training. And we were one of the first, or the first company to be able to show that you can actually train a 107 billion parameter model, which is a large-scale LLM, effectively a large language model, in a fully decentralized fashion. That was 3x the previous record. People didn't think it was possible for a while. And so feel pretty proud that we've been able to kind of get to these milestones. And so net, what this all gets to is that we've effectively built an AI operating system so that you can run AI processes in a fully decentralized manner. And why does that matter? Well, because you get transparency, you get verifiability as part of it, and then ultimately you get safety in AI, because if you have agents that are sovereign agents at some point that are making their own decisions, you can't verify what they actually did. Like, how do you know who to trust? You can trust like one entity like OpenAI to do all this stuff for you, but if you need to really verify for mission critical things like what actually happened, and some of these agents are smart enough to cover their tracks, for example, in centralized systems, then that's not a sufficient answer. Like, hey, all these people got injuries or even worse, got killed because of this malfunction in this AI system. You can't just say like, oh, we don't know what happened. And so that's the kind of future we're building towards. It's like a AI safety future where everything can be verified. And blockchain and kind of the AI capabilities are really a great fit together.
Thank you for that overview. I think the one thing that I really wanted to dive into also is you mentioned this modular, infinitely scalable AI native blockchain, right? So what do you see as the the performance bottlenecks when it comes to building something that's meant to really host all the frequent transactions, right? That happens using your compute, your storage, and data availability.
Yeah, there's definitely limitations at different parts of the system. So, for example, at the application layer, if you wanted to build a high-performance kind of system, let's say like a WhatsApp, it's fully decentralized. What's the amount of transactions per second you need and the type of block finality time that you need in order to enable that? If you want like truly real-time communication, you need probably sub-second like block finality first and foremost. If you need really high performance, like gaming or machine learning operations type of things, you're dealing with like less than 50 millisecond in terms of latency. That's literally would be breaking the laws of physics, because the speed of light can't travel fast enough with multiple hops. So you have to figure out a different architecture to enable that over time. So you have to deal with things like, well, how do you do global consensus but still be local consensus but still be globally distributed over time? And so it creates a whole host of really interesting engineering challenges. And so that's, for example, one is the latency, and there's the transactions per second, so that's the basic throughput part. And then there's also throughput issues on the data level as well. How do you make sure enough data can go through the pipe so that you can actually do things like fully on-chain synchronous training eventually? Definitely not a reality we're there yet, but it could be a possibility in the future. We actually needed to do it and have more verifiability built into it. So I'd say those are the kind of key problems, I'd say, from a scalability standpoint. And then ensuring that no matter what the limitations are, that we're architecting a system that is infinitely scalable over time, so that you can always add more, let's say, compute capacity onto the network as the needs of the network grow.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think we chatted about this before the interview, right? So for Soon, like, we offered this new high performance as service. That's a new narrative that we started launching, and we'd love to explore this right down the road. That we explore deploying that SVM L2 on top of your G's EVM L1, offering this EVM SVM ecosystem benefit, cross ecosystem development benefit as well, right? Something that I think we just talked about, like the value in attracting the global SVM Solana based Rust developers community into the zero gravity community. On top of that, offering these high speed, low latency type of infrastructure. So yeah, we'd love to hear your view on that as well.
Yeah, I think we'd be very excited to support that. I mean, the Solana community is kind of very strong, of course, and very excited to welcome anyone to build the future of AI kind of together with us and to really utilize the capabilities that blockchain-based AI systems enable you. So, as I already mentioned, verifiability, transparency, safety, all of those key things. And so, to some extent, we're agnostic in the sense of what community we can support or how we work together, because this is a kind of problem. Our mission is basically to make AI a public good, and that type of problem and mission transcends differences. I think we all have differences as human beings. Like we they look different, we come from different countries, but fundamentally we're human beings, so there's like a unity in that. And if we get the future of AI wrong and superintelligence takes over and decides human beings are not necessary, then what does it matter what we look like? We won't be existing anymore. So, so to me, really in support of having multiple diverse communities as part of this, and yeah, we'd love to figure out what that looks like. Of course, want to make sure that anything that's done is done with a long-term mindset, one, and then two, is very symbiotic versus actually being competitive over time. We would want to see a situation where it doesn't matter who builds where. Like, should they build on the EVM first? Should they build on the SVM first? It doesn't matter to us. Like, we want to be in a state where it's indifferent so that we can really just push what's best for the builders in that case.
Yeah, really good point. I think especially on the incentive side, right? Like if we can come up with the tokenomics model that it's the share revenue, right? Where each side of the EVM or SVM, the ecosystem development will complement the other, right? So that's always the hard part, is to make sure that people understand there's rewards regardless of the side that you're contributing on. So so people can build within their own realm of expertise.
One perspective is we're like an enabler. We want people that come to our ecosystem to experience a competitive advantage of working with us. And so it's really, we have to be very kind of builder-centric around it and then just support them where they are. We don't want to force them to utilize new things if that's not in their best interest. That's not at all why we exist. We want to just work with the best builders, have a lot of fun doing it, and create a really vibrant ecosystem over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also just from a SVM side, I already think of some synergies, right? If we were to launch this soon, zero-G pilot, can build like a high-frequency AI trading L2 or inference optimized compute layer or performance grade settlement network, right? So there's many different use cases that we can explore together as well.
Yeah, then the only question that remains then is how soon can you launch?
Speaking of soon, okay, I actually really wanted to. That's always a great question. We actually named ourselves, right, like this way. So that's giving folks that expectation that something is coming soon. We built our mainnet within 8 months, and then we kind of launched our products after TGE. We did a bunch of application layer experimentation. So build our own first-party dApp, like a copy trading platform, and now we build a perp all within like the last 6 months since TGE. So yeah, I think we have records speak for itself. Coming back to you though, Michael, I do want to get into that. So post TGE, right? I mean, you guys, first of all, congratulations. It was a fantastic launch. It's probably the most successful launch I've seen in a while. First of all, kudos to you and the team. And I seen your post recently, on Twitter about now it's time to restore, balance into your staff and yourself, right? And your own balance. Even though I still see you flying back and forth to New York, I saw you twice, right, in the last month. Even though you don't live here. So tell us a little bit more about the priorities for this next quarter and how do you actually restore balance in your personal life with a new baby coming out as well.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because what I've observed sometimes in Web3 is that many people thought that TGE is like the end goal. And it's just very strange to me because when TGE happens, your mainnet launches generally. And that means it's like the beginning of the journey. Because if you're building a true ecosystem, true applications, how is TGE the end? It's like the beginning. And so I consistently emphasized with our team that TGE is day one, literally. So there's a lot of stuff that...
Can I ask you, do you feel like your life was more challenging pre-TGE or post-TGE?
That's an interesting question. I haven't really reflected on that too much. It's a bit more challenging post-TG because there's kind of like a life token price and there's certain things that are outside.
I agree with that. And I think that's actually a non-consensus view. Most people are actually telling me the opposite. It's very weird to me that you don't feel more pressure after, because to your point, right, like you're facing not only institutional investors, but retail investors. That's a whole nother level of pressure. And you're just much more, like that, what is it, the Spider-Man movie, right? With greater responsibility comes greater power comes greater responsibility. So that's why I think it's very clear to me, like the pressure is on after.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And the other part that's interesting is that the live token price oftentimes is very much a function of the general environment. And you've seen it with many kind of price charts over time. Like you look at Ethereum, Solana, there were periods where they were just down a lot, like 90+%. And if the locus of control is such in your mind that it's like, oh, I control everything, then you drive yourself crazy because it's like I must not be good, or I'm not doing the right thing, I didn't control for things correctly. And it's completely out of your control. And so there's kind of this idea of extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation as well. If you're truly motivated intrinsically, but let's say for us or for me, it's the mission that we're building, then the token price is irrelevant because there's so many factors that are outside of our control anyways. As long as we build for the long term and people believe in that long-term vision, then things will generally work themselves out. That's kind of my experience as well. And so that part is harder, just disassociating kind of, let's say, identity and view of performance from whatever the token price is. It's kind of irrelevant still because in the early days, it's all about now building a very vibrant ecosystem that's like truly real. You can actually measure everything now. Versus with testnet, there's so many kind of games that can happen, people that just go there for incentives and so on. So yeah, that part makes it harder, I would say.
Absolutely. I think, do you have another thing to add?
Yeah, maybe just around the balance point, and since you brought that up. In general, my previous company was a wellness company, and after 2 years of running it, I felt like completely burned out. And I was like, how ironic is it that I'm running a wellness company and I'm personally burned out? Like, this just doesn't add up somehow.
You're not doing a good ad for your company.
Yeah, I know. It's I'm not being a representative of what the mission of that company stood for. And so at that point, I made the decision, okay, I need to make well-being a non-negotiable. So that means there's certain things that I need to make sure are habit in my life. So have enough sleep, make sure I take appropriate kind of vacation that's actually rejuvenating and restorative, make sure I meditate twice a day. That's been a great practice since Bridgewater, so now a lifelong practice twice a day. Healthy food, great friendship around, and not just make the decision where it's like, oh, work always comes first. No, well-being comes first and the work revolves around it, and then they're both more synergistic as a result. And so that's one of the key principles that I hold, and I've brought that to the rest of the team as well. Because pushing through TGE, I mean, the last 2 weeks before TGE were just some of the most intense work that I've ever done. Because we were launching the digital asset treasury at the same time as the token, at the same time as doing mainnet and doing the KBW kind of prep so there's like 4 things that are literally launching. And even just the digital asset treasury required, 3 hours of calls with like 7 different legal firms, literally every day for 2 weeks straight. And so, yeah, that was intense. And so we needed a bit of a break afterwards too. And so I spent some time in Bali, for example, just getting some like Ayurvedic treatments, and that was very rejuvenating. Made sure I had longer meditations, spent some time with family as well, with my daughter, my wife Ada, and so just really good, rejuvenating for the soul. And I encouraged everyone on the team to also take the break, because once we're back, we have to be very intense about building the ecosystem.
I just wanted to give your wife a huge shout out, like remembering seeing Ada on the Zoom call where she came in with she was still breastfeeding the baby and running that call, and everyone was like, holy cow, she is a killer. I mean, I just feel like as a professional woman in this industry, right? We need to see more role models like that, right? People that just not shying away from their family responsibility, but still, taking that leadership roles, right? And frankly, doing a great job, kick-ass job at both. I think, you kind of have a very strong support, system at the home that always helps as well. So.
I feel very fortunate to have her in my life, and she's added so much joy and happiness and just absolute bliss in being together, both in a personal relationship, as a wife, as a mother, as kind of a business partner, that it's just been a huge joy. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without her support. And she's quite the powerhouse. So when she puts her mind onto something, things kind of get done. And so it's very amazing that she's able to handle all of it, because it's physically very demanding. I mean, I see her, like, breastfeeding is not easy by any ways. All the changes that happen in your body during pregnancy, and then afterwards you have to like get back to work somehow, and you have to make sure your body relaxes as well. And there's just so many things that are kind of getting back into place after it that I really amazed by just women in general. And it's like one of the probably toughest jobs and most rewarding jobs at the same time is to raise a child. And so definitely my heart goes out to all the mothers that have to go through it. And as you said, I'd love to see kind of more role models like that in Web3 as well.
So tell us, I guess the second part of the question, right? Tell us about your priorities for the next quarter.
So think about it as kind of 4 parts. The first part is part of the value proposition of a layer 1 is to make sure that there's a burgeoning DeFi ecosystem and liquidity layer that's available. So that's going to be one of the key pillars. And the second is the application layer, and we're going to be launching some campaigns of applications that you can only build on the Zero-G chain, for example, or within the Zero-G ecosystem. So that's the second pillar. The third pillar is the technical and research leadership, just consistently building on it, consistently stress testing and improving kind of our core infrastructure, as well as build new core infrastructure, so that this whole view of catching up with centralized AI becomes an actual possibility. And then finally, there's also the governance layer and increasing or improving and implementing a decentralized governance layer as well. So we believe in things like optimistic governance, for example, and so starting to see that. So those will be the 4 pillars that we'll be executing on at the same time.
So what would the success look like for you? So when you look at metrics that can define these, success, I think you mentioned ecosystem, right? Developer activity, or the L1 throughput itself, TPS, or partner adoption. What kind of metrics matter to you?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above in some sense matter, but I think if we have one very successful application that's only possible on Zero-G or the ecosystem, I think that's already cause to celebrate. And I think most people don't just look at least from a kind of retail user standpoint, they don't just look at what the infrastructure enables, they really look at what can I do with this, what is the improvement in my life that I can get from it. Like, I'm sure most people use Netflix in some shape or form, and if you go to Netflix and you're like, oh, I have to worry about which AWS server it's sitting on, what the encoding algorithm is, or which payment gateway I'm going to use, like, you're going to lose interest pretty quickly. You're like, all I want to do is I just want to watch the show right now. It's like, why are you making me make all these decisions? And so to us, that's actually where the name Zero-G comes from, is this idea of frictionlessness. How can we make infrastructure completely frictionless and customizable and easy enough to use so that the application developers can mold it to whatever they need for their particular use cases and purposes.
Gotcha. And I think one of the recent priorities of yours is also just continue to build out the ecosystem. So tell us a bit more about some of the call to action there. Specifically, what kind of ecosystem categories maybe, like, do you have preference, or how can people get involved?
Yeah, so we don't generally prescribe just like, here's what you should build, for example. There's certain things that make a lot of sense, like, for example, utilizing some piece of AI within our ecosystem, like, makes sense, just because we've got the compute network, we've got the storage network designed for it. And so if you're not using AI in some shape or form, you can certainly come and build on Zero-G, but you're not using all of the capabilities, for example. So it'd be great to include that kind of component. Then oftentimes we can't yet imagine what the types of applications will be on kind of our ecosystem. So we also don't want to prescribe necessarily what you should build, but there's certain categories that initially make sense. So like robotics is starting to become a big category that we're starting to look at. Agent payments are starting to be a big category that we're starting to look at. And so there's certainly trends that will happen, but there will be new trends that we can't forecast yet as well. And so maybe gaming will be another trend in the future. Like, there's certainly some really cool applications that are launching on Zero-G that are gaming related. And so we have yet to see what people will build kind of over time.
And my last question really coming back to what's trending, right? So we talked about the X402 generating a lot of buzz, something that Coinbase originally proposed, but now it's being adopted by many networks. So given, I saw the chief growth officer to talk about AI agent needs a privacy layer, and zero gravity has its answer to that. So wanted to hear more. Can you tell us more about your view on that?
Yeah, so if I start kind of from this vision of, let's say in 5 to 10 years, maybe most interactions with the internet, maybe through an agent, where you tell an agent, hey, go do this thing for me, like book this travel thing, or order this pizza for me, or find this like restaurant for tonight. Then having this kind of agentic web, you need certain primitives that actually make this work. One of them is, how do agents have wallets? How do they have kind of payment kind of gateways? And so X42 is that kind of standard. Then you need some type of identity for agents, and the recent ERC 8004 kind of is that standard for that. And Zero-G is actually built an identity standard too, but it goes way beyond that, because we also have kind of a privacy layer, because a lot of it gets processed in TEs, for example, which are trusted execution environments, and they keep transactions and compute effectively private in that hardware segregated aspect. And so you can have private data vaults, you can have privacy features. So for example, you don't want certain people to know your purchase history, for example. Like, how do you keep that private? Like, you tell an agent, like, go buy this thing, and it's a surprise for your wife, and then your wife looks at your transaction history and is like, hey, what are you buying?
That's a very, very real example. I love that.
It happened to me. It was actually very funny, like when it was a number of years ago, but Ada looks over my shoulder and I was trying to like hide from it. I was trying to like figure out a surprise birthday trip for her. And she's like, you're going to Hawaii? You didn't tell me you're going to Hawaii. It's like, why are you going there? Like, who are you meeting there? What's going on? It was like, oh no, I have to tell her now. That's a surprise trip for her birthday. And she's like,
you're not a good liar, I can tell.
Yeah. So that's why that would exist effectively. And so it's ERC 7857. It's much more full featured like that. You can even have intelligent like NFTs that evolve over time with that standard. There's quite a lot packed into it.
Awesome. Thank you for that real world example. Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. Honestly, Michael, really great to see you here. We would love to always check in back, and we have a lot to talk about on the SVM, EVM cross ecosystem development, and I am looking forward to see you next in New York.
Looking forward to it as well. Thanks for having me, Joanna. That's super fun.